Okay, looks like we are live again, but it looks like we should be good. There may be a little bug coming from the mobile end. I'm not sure, but we should be good for the most part. It was looking good from my end on the computer. So thanks for your patience. Like David said, this one will be one to remember. It will be worth the wait. So since it's a new broadcast, announcements real quick. Tomorrow, make sure you're here for 8:30. We've got Ron Garrett is back to debate Bill Morgan. So two of our fan favorites. Going to be a lot of fun. Creation versus evolution. Tonight, we're debating the global flood. We're looking forward to this one. David Neff versus Nephilimfree. Do we know who's going first again? My apologies.
David asked to go first, and I said I'm fine with that.
Perfect. So, David, if you're going to be going first, why don't we get a brief introduction from you if you wanted to plug something in? I know you've got an after show after this as well. We'll allow Neff to do the same thing, and then we'll just throw it right back to you to give your opening statement.
Yeah, well, my name is David Neff, and as Saying for Truth already advertised, there is going to be an open mic after show on my YouTube channel that will take place immediately following the debate. So if you want to jump in, have a nice friendly conversation, that is the time to do so. A couple things that I'm working on my channel is the foundational fallacies of creationism. This will be exposing the fallacies behind the creationist arguments, some of the common creation arguments that are presented. So that is a series that is still in the works. With that, I hand it over to Nephilimfree.
Well, my name's Evan. I go by Nephilimfree. I've been doing YouTube Christian and creationist apologetics on the internet for about 11 years now, almost 12, and I love to debate. The flood of Noah is one of my favorite subjects, and I'm really looking forward to this debate, and I thank David for being willing to debate the subject, and it's going to be a good time. We're going to have some fun.
Awesome. Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to this one. Real quick, just from the comment section. Yeah, I after the other one, which was having some buffering issues, I went and rewatched it, and it was there was no issues. It flowed good. So if there is some mobile issues, if there is some buffering, the recording of it will be good. So we might just have to bear with the system tonight. But yeah, like I said, the recording will be good. So question and answer, please tag myself. I will save the questions and we'll have a good Q&A. We've already got a super chat. Brother Chris Keith, he says, LOL, your pizza not in vain. SFT rocks. Awesome. Yeah, we had George Bond had a super chat in the previous stream. Thank you so much, George. Because of you, I had pizza last night, George, but okay. So, and we had some super stickers from Doki Doki Bible Club. So thank you so much. The party begins. Yeah, let's hand it over to David. You have, are we doing 10-minute openings?
Yeah, I will try to keep my opening within 10 to 14 minutes maximum.
Okay. You take your time, and then we're pretty easy going here. Whatever time you take, we are going to give Neff the same amount of time, and then we'll jump into some discussion. So go ahead.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much once again. Thank you, Standing for Truth, for setting this debate up. Thank you, Nephilimfree, for agreeing to debate me on this. And once again, thank you, Freeze, for being an amazing producer. So I do promise you that this is definitely going to be worth the wait. So with that, let's get into the arguments. First, I want to talk about the current geological understanding, which is called actualism, which is different from Lyell's uniformitarianism. For example, the rates of erosions, tectonic plates, etc., are not considered to be constant over time, and it allows for events that we cannot directly observe, such as the late heavy bombardment. And natural catastrophes can and do have an important role in the formation of rocks, etc. So here is the ARC's blueprints. I kind of drew this because I wasn't really satisfied with any of the representations that were already made. The Bible describes an ark that is basically a wooden box. I'm using the rough estimations from Answers in Genesis. There are 3 floors that have, and there's animal cages, of course, a window at the very top. So this is what the ark actually looked like, not anything like what was made by Answers in Genesis and others. My first contention tonight is that the ark is not feasible. Let's consider how many animals were on the ark. Nephilimfree says that animals brought kinds of animals, which are distinct from species. So the obvious questions are the following. What is a kind? How do you tell whether or not two organisms are of the same created kind? And how many kinds are on the ark? Answers in Genesis and others argue that there were 6,000 to 8,000 animals on the ark. I'll talk more about this biology issue later, but let's go for 6,000 animals just to be generous. First, let's figure out the storage needed for food and water. Let's assume that there were 6,000 animals on the ark, and each animal were given 1 gallon of water each day. So 1 gallon per animal times 6,000 animals is 6,000 gallons of water per day. Multiply that by 360 days, and you get 2.16 million gallons of water. And 1 million gallons of water is around roughly 8 pounds, which we are looking at 2 million over 17 million pounds of water that Noah is going to need to bring on the ark. Next, let's figure out the storage that is going to be needed for food. Elephants eat about 200 to 600 pounds of food per day. Let's assume they ate a little bit less and they ate 150 pounds. So 150 pounds for 2 elephants is 300 pounds of food per day, which is going to be 108,000 pounds of food just for the elephants. But let's go a little bit further. Let's just say each animal gets 1 pound of food per day, 6,000 pounds of food per day. That's 2.19 million pounds of food. Where exactly is Noah storing all this? Next, let's look at the issue of species survival. How could the marine organisms possibly have survived the mixture of salinity? How could the organisms have possibly survived the catastrophic plate tectonics that Nephilimfree is proposing, which I will talk about in a minute? And plants can definitely not survive 365 days underwater. Contention number 2 is that the flood is not physically possible. First, let's look at catastrophic plate tectonics. Nephilimfree says that the Earth's continents broke up during the flood. He claimed that they broke up at 35 to 50 miles per hour. Is this even mathematically possible? Well, 35 miles per hour times 24 hours a day is 840 miles per day. That's 126,000 miles during a 150-day period. Earth's circumference is 24,901 miles, which is enough to go around the world 5 times. So this definitely does not look to be physically possible. It gets worse. Let's look at the actual amount of energy that would be actually required to break up these tectonic plates. In 2017, Mexico was struck by an 8.1 magnitude earthquake. The resulting earthquake triggered a tsunami with waves up to 1.75 meters tall and caused 12 aftershocks. The resulting earthquake caused the crust to move only 10 meters, and the Earth's fault line basically 0.01 kilometers. So the amount of force that would be required to move the continents 35 miles per hour all day, every day is just so unimaginable and flies in the face of reality. But it gets worse when you actually take a look at the calories that are going to be required. A calculation from the NCSE arrives at a mind-boggling 3.65 octillion calories, which will raise the Earth's oceans by over 2,700 degrees Celsius, which of course will destroy the ark and boil all the animals alive. And it gets worse. Here's a study done from Answers in Genesis that there is a hard limit of 12 to 13 degrees Celsius for the flood. So all flood models of the flood and its aftermath need to take this hard limit into account. Next, let's look at some of the rainfall issues. The amount of water presently in the oceans is, this is from a paper from Wheaton College called The Physical Constraints of the Noachian Deluge. To cover all the high mountains everywhere and under the heavens would require an additional 4.4 billion cubic kilometers, about 3 times the amount currently in the oceans. Trying to accommodate this much additional water as water vapor in the atmosphere is an impossible task. First, atmospheric pressure would be about 840 times higher than it is now. Second, the atmosphere would be 99.9% water vapor, and it would be impossible for humans and other animals to breathe in such an atmosphere. Third, such a mixture of gas could not even exist at gases at the temperature that humans could tolerate. Fourth, neither could the water be accommodated as clouds droplets, since there would be insufficient nitrogen and oxygen to support them, and since as clouds they would have prevented nearly all sunlight from reaching the surface. In short, such an atmosphere would not have allowed terrestrial life as we know it to exist on the surface of the Earth. Furthermore, thermodynamic considerations related to the condensation of such enormous mass of water vapor creates additional problems, as each kilogram of water condenses 2.26 million joules of energy are liberated. The result is over 3,500 degrees Celsius, and of course, this would cause the temperature of the Earth to be the second hottest thing in the solar system. Next, let's start hydrothermal springs. Again, this is from the same paper, The Physical Constraints of the Noachian Age. Evidence is assumed that the majority of water originated from aquifers within the Earth, then most of the water must have originated from the mantle of depths. The volume of water required could only be contained in the crustal rocks of the oceans and continents if their average porosity was at least 50%. Drilling and seismic data indicates that the actual crustal porosity is much less than 1% due to the compressive effects of the pressure. All the required, So again, significant problems with the hydrothermal springs. Finally, let's look at some of the issues in biology. Some important terms to understand is the bottleneck effect in inbreeding. A population bottleneck is a sharp reduction in the population. When a population is reduced in size, there is also a significant reduction in genetic variation. Consequently, species may not be able to adapt to changing environments. Looking at genetics, we can see what happens when a bottleneck event occurs. If all the species were reduced to only 2 reproducing individuals, there will be extremely harmful effects of inbreeding. There is no way a population can rebound in such a short period of time, let alone create all the excellent biodiversity within a few hundred years after the flood. So inbreeding is the production of offspring from the mating or breeding of individuals or organisms that are closely related genetically. As Joanne Scott points out, if you had a child with someone in the general population, the chances that the two of you would carry the same recessive gene is pretty low. But when you marry a relative, the probability that you're both carrying the same recessive gene is much higher. And so you're in a much higher risk to have a child with a recessive genetic disorder. And the case in point is a cheetah. They suffered a significant bottleneck effect about 10 to 12,000 years ago. A 5-year study in the early 80s showed that the cheetah genetic pool resembles that of a highly inbred mice used for scientific research. Essentially, the entire population has been built up from too small of a stock. The result was a species in which 70% of males had abnormal sperm and infant mortality soared to over 29%, even in captivity. In the wild, only about 5% of cheetahs survived to adulthood. To give you an idea of just how serious the inbreeding problem is, among related animals of most species, you can expect to see 80% gene similarity. Related to the cheetahs have 99% gene similarity. So effectively, they are each other's identical twin. So in conclusion, the story of the Ark is not feasible, it is not physically possible, it is not biologically possible, and actualism is a better explanation of a reality than the flood. A couple other points that I want to make is how did the Nephilim survive the flood? And if 99% of species are extinct, wasn't the flood a failure? Thank you very much. I look forward to Nephilimfree's arguments.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David, for that opening. Yeah, it looks like you were right on the 10-minute mark. So good job. We will give Neff 10 minutes as well. And then what I'll do, because we do have 10-minute openings with a lot of points being brought up, once the openings are done, I'll give you each a 5-minute uninterrupted rebuttal just to try and address each other's points. And then we'll go into the discussion. I think that'll be the best way to proceed. So, Neff, whenever you're ready, okay. 10 minutes.
All right, first let me rapidly shoot down the things that he said, and then I'll provide the evidence. He said they couldn't have carried all the water on there. The oceans didn't become heavily salinated until after the flood. It was the flood that salinated the oceans. They didn't have to bring drinking water. They could have drunk the ocean. Plants don't, you said plants couldn't have survived on the Ark. How'd that work? The trillions times trillions of seeds were buried in sediment. when the waters receded from the earth, they simply sprouted. Assumptions about the energy released, evolutionists play games with math that doesn't work. Animals couldn't have eaten, would have had a problem being on the ark all that time. I don't think so. I think God probably made them all hibernate. Recent studies have shown that mice have a gene in their genome that, if turned on genetically by scientists, will put a mouse to sleep into a hibernative state. It's likely that all species have these genes, and God used them to put the animals to sleep. Why would a mouse have genes for hibernation? You could say the same thing about a lion or a rhinoceros. You said the waters couldn't have covered the mountains, the amount of water necessary. This stems from a tremendously gross misunderstanding of the flood model and a terrible lack of irresponsibility on the behalf of evolutionists to not understand. The mountains rose out of the flood. Water didn't have to achieve, this is the most ridiculous idea, the waters didn't have to achieve the height necessary to cover them as we have mountains today. It's tremendously irresponsible for somebody not to study the flood model enough to know this. The rain would have created tremendous heat. It rained for only 40 days and nights. They have monsoons in India that last for a week. It doesn't make the temperature of the place rise. In fact, rain cools the air. Water couldn't have been enough water inside the earth, but there are massive reservoirs of water inside the earth right now, like the Beijing anomaly. It's enough to fill the North Sea. The diversity problem, genetic diversity problem, you said bottlenecks. Well, God was smart, and that's why he told Noah he brought 7 of each kind. So I'm just going to use the example of bison to refute your ideas about genetic bottlenecks. Every bison on the earth today, the tens of thousands of them, were produced by 2 handfuls of bison. The entire population of bison on this planet was reduced to a couple of dozen a century or a little more than a century ago. Every bison on the earth today is the offspring of 20 to 30 something bison that lived just about the turn of the 20th century. I don't see a genetic problem there. So actually, African diversity contradicts the evolutionist idea about genetic bottlenecks would have been a problem. So let me provide for you some irrefutable scientific evidence that shows the flood of Noah is a real geologic event. The Earth is covered with an average of 1,800 meters of sedimentary strata, which can only be formed and are formed and verified to form in laboratory experiments by rapidly moving water. One strata above is not any older than the one below it. 1,800 meters of sedimentary strata filled with rapidly buried creatures. These strata are formed by moving water. They are not formed by Unitarian processes. There is no way to squeeze uniformitarian time in between them, because as they form together in groups horizontally. The Earth is covered also with at least 5 major sequences, global sequences. These sequences of sedimentary strata span all the continents of the Earth, including Australia. That could only be if the flood was global. Okay, so here's some how big they are. The Navajo sandstone is 400,000 square miles. Coconino is 315 feet thick and 518,000 square miles. The tapetes and Redwall, massive. The chalks of Dover, England, the same thing, massive. The Miltia Permia Quixa in China is 1.2 square miles, a million miles. That's a massive area of land. Okay, so the mountains rose out of the earth. Let me show you proof of that. Right here's proof of it. The mountains of the earth contain folded and bent strata, deformed strata, this is the geological term for them. This is only possible if the materials were soft sedimentary materials when they were squeezed with horizontal pressures because the continents were moving and pushed them up out of the earth. This is the Zagros Mountains in Afghanistan. The mountain has been deformed, looks like an accordion. The only way that's possible, because rock doesn't bend, it breaks. Cold rock will not bend, will not bend. It breaks. Okay, so the only way it's possible for all these mountains on the earth to have deformed strata like this is if they were comprised of soft sedimentary materials still moist with sediment, water, when they were squeezed horizontally and uplifted out of the earth, and that's why they have these accordion shapes. It's the only way. Because if you squeeze solid cold rock that way, it will not deform. And you cannot deform a mountain 10 to 20 kilometers deep inside the earth where the temperature is high enough to deform it, and then push it up as a prefab mountain all over the earth, because that would reduce it. You would have to push it up through 10 to 20 kilometers of overburden. That would reduce the mountain to a pile of gravel. If you say the overburden eroded to reveal the mountains as the mountains rose, now you've got to explain why 10 to 20 kilometers of material from the entire continents eroded into the ocean. Where did it go? Where is it? There's only 12 million years worth of sediments on the ocean floor. If the continents eroded 10 to 20 miles deep to allow the mountains to rise by uniformitarian geology, that means 10 to 20 miles of the entire continent would have had to have gone into the oceans. Where is it? Where? It's not there. Because the mountains couldn't have formed by uniformitarian formation. It's impossible. They formed by... This is called a chevron fold, and there's an unconformity right above it. This proves catastrophism, explains the geologic column. Rock does not bend unless it's subjected to about 500 degrees, 10 to 20 kilometers down inside the earth. These features are on the surface of the earth, and that unconformity sheared off those sedimentary materials, which were soft and plastic, and laid down some more, while that stuff below it was still soft and moist. That's impossible under uniformitarian geology. This is Sheep Mountain in, I believe it's in Wyoming. You can see that the deformation of the materials on the surface of the earth is what caused that mountain to rise. Not 10 to 20 kilometers down, on the surface. And that's solid rock. It was pushed up during the Noahic flood because it was soft sedimentary material. The mountains of the earth proved the flood. This is a coconino sandstone in the American Southwest near the Grand Canyon. It possesses what you see there is called a parabolic recumbent fold. That's impossible unless that sand was deposited in water. Dry sand will not form a recumbent fold. It has to be full of water to do so. This means the entire Coconino and Navajo sandstone formations, which cover thousands and thousands of square miles in the American Southwest, were all deposited by a single massive geological watery event. That means there was a flood. Now, water won't pass through a mountain solid rock. Water follows the path of least resistance. If it could magically climb up the foothills to a mountain, it would then just go around it. But it won't eat through a solid mountain. Mountains are made of rock. So what would happen? Well, it may form a lake, but it would still go follow the path of least resistance and go around the mountain. Then why do we have it will not eat through it? It will not. So why do we have these? That's called a water gap. That's where a massive stream of very powerful water literally ate through the mountain because the mountain was soft, moist, sedimentary materials recently deposited by the flood of Noah. This is a very famous mountain in Virginia, and the mountain has been eaten clean through by a river. But rivers can't do that to solid mountains because they're made of rock. Water follows the path of least resistance, not the toughest resistance. And the hardest resistance for a mountain, for a river, is a mountain that's standing 4,000 feet above the ground. Instead, it goes around it. The only way this could exist is if that entire mountain were soft sedimentary materials recently deposited by the flood, and they were still soft. You could reach down, squeeze a handful of it, and make a dirt clod out of it. The entire mountain. And that's why a powerful stream of water moving at 75 to 150 miles per hour ran into that at the end of the Noahic flood and ate right through that mountain. Water will not do that to solid rock. It follows the path of least resistance, not the greatest. It will not climb over a mountain and eat through it. It goes around it. So this is not possible unless the flood of Noah exists. These are percussion marks. There are thousands and millions of them all over the world. Small rocks all the way up to massive boulders show that they have been impacted by other rocks. That's only possible if a stream of water moving at very high speed, a very great amount of water, was pulling rocks, even massive boulders that weighed many tons, tens of tons, and at high speed, and they were all slamming into each other left and right. That's why percussion marks like that exist. Because the rock, no matter how big it is, whether it's the size of a golf ball or the size of your house, if it has a percussion marks on it, it's because it was moving in a very powerful, giant stream of water. This is a percussion mark in the side of a mountain in California. It's so big you could build multiple houses inside of it. That mountain got hit by a boulder that weighed more than a building, which was moving at anywhere from 40 to 100 miles per hour. That's only possible if the catastrophic current of water, anywhere from 1 to 300 feet deep, moving at 100 miles per hour or more, pulled a boulder that weighs as much as a city block and rammed it into that mountain, while that mountain was still soft sedimentary material. What you see on the screen is impossible under uniformitarian geology. Impossible. Cannot happen. Rocks that weigh as much as buildings, 5-story buildings or 10-story buildings, do not go rolling across the surface of the earth today. That just doesn't happen. It had to have been in a massive stream of water with unbelievable force to roll that boulder as big as a 4-story building into the side of that mountain and cause a percussion mark. That's the only way that can be explained. Here's a quartzite boulder that weighs about 2, maybe 3 tons, and you can see the sedimentary strata deformed around it while it was because the sedimentary strata were laid down by the flood. That's the only way that could exist. The erosion rates of the continents of this world are outrageous. In 12 million years, or a little more, maybe 18, there would be no continents at the current rate of the erosion. It's impossible. There 7 football fields worth of wetlands disappear from this every hour of every day on this earth. It's amazing, the erosion mark. This is what Katrina did to one hurricane did to southern Louisiana, Hurricane Katrina. Now, if the continents were millions and millions of years old, how many thousands of hurricanes do you think would have been eating away at the continents? There wouldn't be continents. Uniformitarian geology is impossible. Here's a coast in California. You can see a picture from 2013 and 2017. Look how much material is eroded away in 4 years. 4 years. Now do the math. No continents in 12 million years. They wouldn't be here. The earth would be a ball of water. Okay. The amount of materials broken off around the Grand Canyon, lying on the shelves and at the bottom, is a pitifully ridiculous amount. Had the Grand Canyon been 66 million years old, like claimed, it would be rounded down. It would be a valley. It wouldn't have any edges to it at all. And certainly not at the top. But it's all edgy. Look at the pitiful amount of material that's broken off and eroded to the bottom of that canyon. If that canyon were 60 some odd million years old,
got about a minute left. No,
okay,
1 minute.
it would be rounded smooth. This is a volcanic intrusion. It's volcanic material that pushed up through the soft, moist sediments of the earth during the flood of Noah. Look at the bottom and you see this pitiful amount of material that's eroded off of that. If that column of volcanic material had been standing there for 20 million years, it would be rounded down. Wouldn't even be there. But if it was subjected to even 4 million years worth of erosion, half of it would be at the bottom. Not that pitiful amount. Same thing here. Shiprock in Arizona. No way. That's 4,000 years worth of erosion since the flood, 4,500, not 44 million. Same thing here. Methane hydrates line the continents of the earth, massive amounts. It's enough energy to power the earth for a whole year, according to the for a century, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. That's massive amounts of material, plant materials that were washed off the continents at the end of the Noahic flood, eroded by bacteria, waterlogged, sank to the bottom of the ocean, buried in subsequent sediments, and became methane hydrates. It's enough energy to power the earth for a century. I could provide so much more. I'm going to pass over the screen there. These are just a few of the many, many, many proofs of the Noahic flood, but I guess that concludes my presentation.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that opening presentation there, Neff. Both of you, good job. We appreciate the visuals. Makes the openings a lot more fun. So yeah, good job to the both of you. And what we'll do now is, because a lot of points, I guess, were presented by the both of you, why don't we throw it back to David, where, David, I'm going to have to be a little more strict with this one. Since your openings were between 10 and 14 minutes, let's do an uninterrupted rebuttal of 5 minutes. I'm going to time it right now on my, okay. So you got 5 minutes to address as much as you can with Neff's opening, and then we'll do the same to Neff, and then we'll go into a free-flowing dialogue at that point. So go ahead, David.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that fantastic opening statement. I hope you all are enjoying this debate, because I certainly am as well. First, Nephilimfree says oceans did not become selenited until after the flood. Well, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. I want to know what his evidence for that is. We know that there are organisms, marine organisms, that have to live in salty environments, and we have marine organisms that have to live in freshwater environments. So where exactly were they living before the flood? Again, he provided absolutely no evidence for that claim. Second, plants had not survived until after the flood. I don't think I can't remember exactly what he said about that. So please remind me when you do that. I know you're interested, but I couldn't remember what you said. You said that God made the animals on the ark hibernated. This is directly contradicted by the Bible. Genesis clearly states that Noah is to bring living. This is directly from the Bible. You are to bring into the ark 2 of every living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, every kind of animal, and every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. Here's the key. You are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and stored away for food for you and for them. So this is directly contradicts that Nephilimfree's claim that the animals hibernated on your ark. Next, he claims that mountains rose out after the flood. Again, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. The Bible claims that there were high mountains on the earth before the flood. So exactly how, so my question for Nephilimfree therefore must be, what exactly was the highest point prior to the flood? Because there were obviously high mountains. He says massive reservoirs of water are under the ground. Again, how exactly did they come up from the earth, and how exactly did they get back to where they are now? And of course, underneath the earth is very hot, so of course it would be the water would be piping hot and boil all the marine organisms alive. Next, he says that about the bottlenecks that God was born, he brought 7 kinds of each animal. Again, that's not what the Bible says. Read the Bible. It says that he brought 2 kinds of every animal, and then he brought 7 kinds of the clean animal. So if the animal was clean or kosher, it would have been 7 animals, which were subsequently a couple of them were sacrificed after the flood, reducing their genetic population even further. Next, I want to kind of get into his evidence for geology. So let me share my screen one more time. Application window. All right. Can you share my screen real quick? Can you share my screen real quick? There we go. Sure. So let me address some of his evidence from geology, and I have a couple visuals for him from there. So first, let's talk about how mountain ranges form. Here's an example of how the Himalayan forms. We have the Indian Australian plates and the Eurasian plates. They are slamming into each other, which is causing the mountains to uplift. And we know that they are still uplifting because we have GPS data that can precisely determine how much the Himalayan mountains are growing. And the same is true with every mountain range as well. They are growing. And we can measure that precisely with GPS technology. And also, I want to point out as well that we can measure the continental rate of speed, the continental drift from GPS as well. For example, a few years ago, they had to keep updating the GPSs because Australia was moving so far up north at a pretty high rate of speed. Well, in geological terms, kind of high rate of speed. So they had to update the GPS technology. Let's look at the rim folds. Again, this is very well known. Any geology textbook will tell you this. The common folds are horizontal and axial planes, where the rims of a fold are essentially parallel to each other and thus are approximate. The fold are called a isoclinal. So how are these folds formed? Well, the folding occurs when tectonic processes put stress on a rock and the rock bends instead of breaking. This can
You've got 20 seconds, David. 20 seconds.
Sorry, just gonna be there. This can create a variety of landforms, such as the surface of folded rocks are eroded. And this is very well known as well. And this has been demonstrated under laboratory conditions. So again, no flood is needed for the unconformities. No flood is needed for the folded rocks. With that, I turn it back over to Nephilimfree.
Okay, thank you, David. Just on time, 5 minutes. And Neff, you got 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Okay. So the salination of the oceans, how would that be a problem? Well, the rate of salination has been discovered by geologists. It's 457 million tons of sodium into the oceans every year. That's how much it increases every year. This limits the age of the Earth's oceans to 62 million years by uniformitarian geology. That's it. 62 million years. Obviously, that's not true, not according to you. So the salination occurred during the flood by opening salt domes that were inside the Earth, and chemistry, which can produce salt, heat, pressure, these things. So the salination rate refutes your argument. You said the animals couldn't have been hibernated because this contradicts the Bible. I think you haven't read the Bible carefully enough. The animals and Noah stayed on the ark for 1 year after the ark came to rest. That's a whole year. Okay, so that's when they began to eat, when they came out of hibernation, not while they were in hibernation. When the ark came to rest, they woke up, they began to eat. Noah didn't, it's not contradicted by the Bible. You say, the Bible says about the high mountains of the earth. I'm hearing feedback. The high mountains of the earth. What, according to what, though? What is a high mountain? On the earth, it wouldn't have been, the high mountains of the earth certainly wouldn't have been as we see them today, because as we can tell by geology, the mountains possess folded and bent, deformed strata, and they're made of strata. And that's not possible under uniformitarian geology. Only the flood of Noah can explain why the mountains of the earth are comprised largely of sedimentary, folded and bent sedimentary strata with even recumbent folds. It can't be produced that way under uniformitarian geology. Only the flood can explain that. You say hot water can't have been, the water couldn't have been so hot inside the earth. Well, how deep? You're presuming you know how deep the water was. Was it 30 or 60 miles down? No, it was probably anywhere from 8 to 12 miles deep. It's not going to be scalding hot there. You say the mountain building at the rate that we see it today, we can GPS measure the rate at which mountains rise. Well, that's how fast they rise now. The continents have largely come to a stop. This rapid subduction and runaway subduction and rapid continental movement that occurred during the flood is not going on today. So the mountain building can only be explained by the Noahic flood. There's so much that can be said about that. You should read my post in the Creation Wiki on mountain building. I've edited that article, and I've got an extensive little edit block in there about how mountains can't have been formed by anything but the flood of Noah. It's not possible. If I'm wrong about that, then you need to be able to explain to us how the mountains can have possessed, all these mountains around the world can possess folded and deformed strata, littered with rapidly buried creatures, and possess and recumbent folds. You need to be able to explain how a mountain 10 to 20 kilometers deep inside the earth comes up without being destroyed, or how 10 to 20 kilometers of overburden, that's material sitting on top of where the material you think is going to be a mountain, 10 to 20 kilometers down, if that had to erode to allow the mountain to rise up to be above the surface of the earth, 10 to 20 kilometers of the entire continent, of the entire surface of the whole continent had to go somewhere. You have to be able to explain how that rate of erosion would allow a continent to exist in 50 million years, much less 450 million years. That's the only way you can refute creationist explanation for mountains, is to explain how 10 to 20 kilometers of the Earth's crust eroded into the oceans, and we can't find any of it. That's because there's only 12 million years worth on the ocean floors. Just 12 million years worth. There's not 10 to 20 kilometers of ocean of continental material in the oceans. It's not there. Where does it go? See, so you've got a lot of explaining to do, Lucy. You've got to explain how the mountains of the earth could rise from the 10 to 20 kilometers of overburden, which is necessary for uniformitarian mountain building to occur. Where did all that go? And if that rate of erosion is occurring on the continents, you also need to be able to explain how the Earth's environment on the surface could be changing so horrifically, so rapidly, and yet there's all this evolution going on with all these creatures nicely conformed to their ecological niches during all this catastrophic erosion. Every 50 million years, 10 to 20 miles of the continent is gone into the ocean. Explain how evolution is occurring in an environment like that, and then you'll have something to talk about. Okay, so that's the end of my rebuttal.
Awesome. Right on time. Okay, so we got some good openings and some good rebuttal rounds. So let's go into more of I guess, an organic, free-flowing dialogue. Since Neff just finished talking with his rebuttal, David, if you'd like to, you can start with a question or a point, and then we will allow Neff to respond, and we'll kind of go from there. We'll just keep it nice and organic. So go ahead, David. David, you may be on mute.
Oh, I am so sorry. Once again, thank you, Nephilimfree, for your rebuttal. So why don't we start with the catastrophic tectonic model that you proposed, where you said that the Earth continent broke up at 35 to 50 miles per hour. How exactly does that work?
Well, that's because God split the Earth's crust at the mid-oceanic ridges, and the continents pushed away from there, and they moved rapidly. We know they moved rapidly because rapid subduction is what has caused massive slabs of the Earth's crust, oceanic crust, to subduct deep into the Earth, into the outer mantle of the Earth, deep into the mantle, the upper mantle of the Earth. Now, that material is at a considerably different temperature than the material around it. It's much cooler. Okay, if that material were down inside the Earth for millions of years, it would have achieved the same temperature as the materials around it. The only reason it can be under a significantly lower temperature than the very hot material that it's around is if it got there quickly and recently. So you'd have to explain to us how a slab of oceanic crust can sit down inside material that's 1,600 degrees or more and not rise to that temperature over millions and millions and millions and millions of years. I'd like to hear you explain that.
All right, but first, would you agree with my overall math that they brought up that 35, if we do 35 miles per hour per day, that's 840 miles an hour a day. So assuming your lower end, that's 126,000 miles during the 150-day period that the continents would have to be moving. Would you agree with that overall math?
I don't know. I haven't looked at that math, so I can't agree with mathematical equations that I haven't examined.
Okay, well then take out a pencil, take out a calculator, and do the math yourself.
Okay, so what is the point you're trying to make about the rate at which the continents were moving apart during the first, say, half of the Noahic flood?
Okay, sure. So 35 miles per hour per day, that's 24 hours in a day, that's 840 miles per day, correct?
I guess your math is right about that, okay?
Okay, so if we do 840 miles every day, we would be going 126,000 miles.
Okay, so you're relying, it seems, on an assumption of how long the continents were moving at that rate, well, and then trying to make a straw man argument against the flood.
Okay, well, I'm just pointing out 30. That's what you said when you were in the live stream.
I didn't say how long they moved at that rate. I just said they moved at a high rate of speed during the first part of the Noahic flood. I didn't say how many months or weeks that they moved at that rate.
Well, you did say 35 miles an hour times 24 hours. You did say 35 to 50 miles per hour, correct?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it has to. I mean, you've got to explain these massive slabs of oceanic crust deep inside the Earth that are far cooler than the materials around them. How'd they get down there? You know, a tornado can take a piece of straw and shove it into a pine tree because the speed at which it's moving will push it in there. If there wasn't a Noahic flood, one piece of continental crust would have simply ridden over the top of the other. It wouldn't have turned and faced down and gone down into the Earth. That requires a massive amount of surging energy to shove that slab of continental crust deep into the Earth. At the rate of uniformitarianism continental movement, it's not possible for that continental crust to just turn south and get slowly pushed down. It would turn into gravel. You can't move that kind of material at that rate deep into material that is really hard, because the crust of the mantle, upper mantle of the Earth, is got a lot of gravity on it. It's dense. You're trying to push a skin of the Earth down into that material which is held compact and tight by the Earth's gravity. I don't know how you're going to explain that. You need a lot of fast action movement power, like the tornado throwing a piece of broom straw into a pine tree and shoving it into the tree. But you try to push that piece of broom straw into that pine tree at 1 millimeter a week, and it ain't going nowhere. It's just going to crumble as you push it up to the tree. The same thing is true of the slabs of continental crust. You can't shove them deep into the mantle of the Earth. Slowly, they'll just crush or ride on top of each other. Only rapid, powerful, and crazy energy can explain them being shoved deep into the Earth. Do you get my point?
Not really. And the reason why,
No?
hold on, let me kind of explain a little bit more about my position, and something I also wanted to address real quick. Again, you said, and you'll see where I'm going with this. You said that the continents largely came to a stop after the flood, correct?
I'm sorry. Let me turn my volume up a little. I said that what now? Please repeat that.
You said that and you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute, that the continents largely came to a stop after the flood, correct?
I didn't say they came to a stop. They ground to a halt, you might say. They slowed down dramatically because the energy had been used up.
So, but yeah, but you do have to agree that the continents are still moving and they're still drifting, and that mountain building.
Yeah, they're moving very slowly. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Okay, so how does that prove uniformitarianism is true?
Okay, well, we see a lot of these same features, more like huge mountains and even huge canyons on other planets, such as Mars and other things. So again, here's the problem with your position. If you want to say that these geological factors can only be explained by a global flood, then you must also, by logical extension, say that there had to be a global flood on, say, Mars and other planets as well. Do you think that there was a global flood on Mars?
No, I don't think I have to, because we don't have the same evidence on Mars or other planets that we do on the Earth. On top of that, the geological activity that's going on the planets and moons in our solar system indicates that they're young, or they would be frozen solid. Some of them, especially the moons, Io and Europa. These planets, they're not Io and Enceladus, they're spewing stuff in liquids into space, but they're tiny. They can't be millions of years old. They'd be frozen like a rock all the way through. Secular astronomers are scratching their heads. How can this be? They don't have an explanation. They think maybe frictional tidal friction is kneading them, and that's just a rescuing device. So I don't think, no, I don't have to have the same evidence on another planet because there's geological activity there that I do on the Earth, because the evidence is not the same. But I would like to hear you explain, if uniformitarianism is true and the flood of Noah didn't create the mountains of the Earth, how is it possible for them to have folded and deformed strata, even parabolic recumbent folds, if their continents were the mountains were formed 10 to 20 kilometers inside the Earth and then pushed up? Again, I ask you, where did the 10 to 20 kilometers of overburden? I don't know if you know what I mean by overburden. Overburden means all the materials on top of whatever it is you're discussing that's down inside the Earth. That material is called by geologists overburden. Okay, so if the mountains were squeezed and deformed deep inside the Earth where the temperature is high enough to cause the rock to deform that way, possibly. Wouldn't explain recumbent folds though, but with fossils in them. But let's imagine that this happened and the fossils were buried 10 to 20 kilometers down. Now you've got 10 to 20 kilometers of continental material on top of where it's going to be a mountain range. Where did that material go? And how can evolution occur over vast millions of years if the environment is changing so much that in only 20 million years, 10 to 20 kilometers of the entire surface of the Earth is gone? Every 20 million years, 10 to 20 or 40 million years, even 50? Let's give you 50 million years for the formation of a mountain range. 50 or 60, let's give you 70 million years. How in the world can millions of species be evolving slowly in all these nice little ecological niches when the continents are eroding at a rate of 10 to 20 kilometers every 50 or 60 million years? How does evolution occur on an environment like that? How could they survive that kind of global environmental change so that 10 to 20 kilometers of the Earth's continents are gone every 50 or 60 million years into the oceans? How does evolution occur under those conditions?
Okay, go ahead, David, if you'd like to answer that question. And David, just make sure that you're off mute, and then also just some requests from the chat. Just make sure you're speaking, I guess, closely to the mic, just so we can see and we can hear your arguments. Go ahead, David. David, you're on mute.
Okay, I'm sorry. Is this any better?
Yeah, you sound fine, David.
Okay, sure. So I have a little bit of an animation here that I would like to present if that's okay with you.
Sure, as long as it's short. We want to keep this thing,
The
forth.
whole thing is only 3 minutes, but I'm not going to play the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, we definitely want to keep it a free-flowing dialogue. So if you do have an image or a clip, let's play it. But yeah, let's keep it short. So I'm guessing we got a screen share. So just let us know. Praise, I think I'll do this one. So okay, good, you're good to go.
We don't hear any audio, so David, can you maybe explain to us what you're seeing? Is this an alleged explanation of uniformitarian mountain building or subduction?
As one plate subducts or dives beneath the other, the ocean basin closes.
And less
I'm just going to reverse real quick.
resistant layers.
Mountain belts are created when continents collide. In this experiment, we see two continents separated by an ocean. Now watch what happens as the plates converge. As one plate subducts or dives beneath the other, the ocean basin closes. The continental crust, which is lighter than oceanic crust, cannot be subducted. Instead, as the continents collide, the crust thickens and is forced up. Note how the sand is folded and faulted. We see similar structures in the rocks in.
So basically, the point of the matter is the way that mountains are building, the way that mountains are built is very well understood, and we don't need a Noachian flood to explain them. And let me go back to the Bible real quick. What translation do you prefer?
I'm sorry, what?
What Bible translation do you prefer?
King James.
David, I think you're on mute. David?
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
We got to teach you how to work that mute button.
Yeah, the point that I was trying to make earlier is that there were high mountains on the ark. The King James, unfortunately, calls them high hills, mighty hills.
Boring!
I'm sorry, David. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah, the Bible in Genesis 7 says that there were mighty mountains, there were high hills before the flood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there were mountains, right. And what he called high. But you're assuming that what he called a high mountain is like the high mountains of today. Now, the video you showed only made the point for me. There are two ways that mountains form. There's the way that you showed, where two crusts, two slabs of the continental material meet, and the material is pushed up. between them. And then there's the other kind of mountain, inland mountains, not like the Rockies, which were not the result of subducting plates, like on the edge of the coast of California or the Appalachians. And these mountains allegedly rose from 10 to 20 kilometers down inside the earth and were pushed up. So you still have to explain where 10 to 20 kilometers of continental material is growing every 50 million years to get the mountains of the earth, because if enough material eroded that would enough overburden that would reveal an entire mountain range like the Rockies, then that material, it wouldn't just be over the mountains to come, it would be over the whole continents. That kind of erosion would be continental, and that's just not possible. Not even evolution could occur on the surface of the earth with such catastrophic events going on at such a rate that 10 to 20 kilometers of the earth's environment is eroded every 10 to 20 million years. You might as well give evolution a rest, because it's just not going to be happening. Nothing is going to live in a stable environment long enough to evolve into anything else. And so the materials of the earth the mountains of the earth possess folded and strata with recumbent folds. This is a mountain on the surface of the earth. This is not material that was deep inside. This is the Rocky Mountains. This was allegedly inside the earth, but you can see it's got recumbent folds. And this is also the Rocky Mountains. This material is folded. Rock, solid cold rock, does not bend, David. It breaks. It has to be heated to 500 centigrade or so. That's about as hot as your oven will get, and then have gentle pressure applied to it for a long period of time. And then it has to be pushed up completely out of the earth and remain intact. That's just not possible. This is an entire folded mountain. This is an anticline. That entire mountain was soft sedimentary material, and so were all the other mountains in that range. You can see that they were deformed. They were once the surface of the earth. If that material was solid rock, that whole mountain was solid rock, it would not deform in this curved fashion. It's impossible. At the earth temperature of the earth's surface, it would simply crumble. The mountain, it would be gravel. It would be a pile of gravel, not a mountain. The only way this is possible is if all of these mountains you see, and all the mountains of the earth, were soft sedimentary materials which were bent because they were still moist with water in them, and when the pressure was applied, they deformed. That's the only way that a mountain can form. Here's one that's completely curved. It's a pair of this mountain possesses massive number of folds in it, recumbent folds, parabolic folds. Look how distorted that material is, contorted. It bends back on itself without breaking. Cold rock doesn't do that. So David, maybe you can explain to us, and this mountain, what a contorted mess that is. That you have to be able to explain, and this one just kills it all. How do you explain cold rock bending like that? And here's a giant slab of material being uplifted out of the surface of the earth. This material was the surface of the earth, but it's curved. It's solid rock. How does solid rock at the surface temperature of the earth deform like that? Does it bend? Rock doesn't bend. David, you have to explain how solid rock bends at the surface temperature of the earth. That's the only way you can say uniformitarian mountain building is true, unless this material was soft and sediment moist material. Can you see, David, that the creationist explanation that these materials were soft, moist sediments has explanatory power? Because if it's soft and sedimentary material, moist with water in it, it would bend like that. But can you also see, can you be intellectually honest enough to admit, at least to yourself, that this material was solid, cold rock at the surface of the earth at the temperature you would get if you dug 30 feet down into it, 100 feet? It would not bend. It would shatter. Can you admit that cold, hard rock at the surface of the earth will not bend, but will shatter? And if you can admit that, then maybe you can explain to us why you believe uniformitarian mountain building is possible. You're going to have to explain how cold, solid rock on the surface of the Earth's crust is able to bend and distort. That's the only way you can put your case.
Neff, if you wanted to keep showing some slides, I think David dropped out, or maybe all the evidence you were providing blew his mind. But he just
He's not in the live stream anymore?
his thing just left, so
Okay, so maybe he's having a technical issue. Let's wait a few minutes and see if
he could be having some technical.
he may be glitched, his ISP may have blipped him or something.
Okay, so according to evolution, things are supposed to get better on their own. So maybe we'll sit here and wait 1 trillion years and see.
Well, there was a cosmic dot that exploded, and thus there were modems. That's, how true can we get, right?
Okay, so let's do this then while we're waiting for David. So a bunch of super stickers from Doki Bible Club. Thank you so much. And a couple, let's see, Doki has a super chat, $10. Thanks so much. Why didn't Noah help Tom Hanks and Wilson in Castaway? Well, that's a tough question. If you got an answer for that one?
Okay, well, let me see. What was the question?
It was just a joke. It was just a joke from Doki. Okay. You ever seen that movie Castaway?
Okay.
Tom Hanks. He was stuck on.
So Tom Hanks was writing something Noah didn't build. That's the problem. Noah used massive tree timbers to build an ark that could withstand virtually anything, and with timbers, the center of very massive trees, you could drive an 18-wheeler over and the thing wouldn't even creak. It wouldn't even complain.
Brother Neff, I'm just emailing David if you wanted to. You're still Oh, it looks like we got David. Neff is back. David, we thought we lost you. Thanks for
Yeah, hey, I'm so sorry. I got disconnected. I hit the wrong thing while I was trying to do something. I was trying to hit the other tab. So I do apologize for getting disconnected.
Hey, David, no problem. It gave us a chance to go over some of the super chats and the super stickers. What I want to do, Neff, if you want to ask your question in a short, clear, concise way, and then we'll have David directly address that question.
Yeah, and Sandy, since I know Nephilimfree has been taking quite some time to respond, do you mind if we go into timed responses, maybe 30 seconds to ask a question and 90 seconds to answer and something like that? Because I don't want him to.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do this. Let's have Neff ask his question, and then David, you take a minute to answer it, just as long as we're directly answering the question, and then a little bit of back and forth, and then we'll have David ask a question. We'll give Neff uninterrupted time to answer it, and we'll kind of go from there. So, Neff, if you want to ask your question, and then David, we'll get a direct answer from you. So go ahead.
Okay, so since I've provided photographic proof that mountains comprised of the surface of the earth have been bent and folded and distorted, David, I would like for you to tell me, can you explain, please, how that material, which is solid rock and at the temperature of the surface of the earth, the temperature you would get if you bored down into it 10 feet, 30 feet, 100 feet, 300 feet, which is not going to be significantly different from the surface of the earth where you're walking, how rock can bend when it's that temperature without being crushed into gravel. And can you all, as a follow-up to that question, can you see how the Noahic flood has explanatory power, since if those materials were soft and moist and laden with water, they would be plastic, and then it would be easily explainable why they deformed if the pressure was applied to them?
Okay, yeah, sure. So allow me to kind of address a few things at once. First, let's talk a little bit about the formation of the Rocky Mountains, because that is one of the things that you brought up. So again, continental plate collision definitely best explains this as well. Again, we can take GPS satellite data showing that exactly the way that they grow over the past several decades as we've been keeping track of this. So again, I just don't understand. I mean, we understand how mountain ranges build over millions and millions of years. We don't need a global flood to explain it. So now let me get into the folding and the issue of folding. Again, we know how folding occurs. and tectonics explains this quite well. Folding occurs when tectonic plates put stress on a rock and the rock bends instead of breaking. This can create a variety of landforms, such as the surface of the folded rocks that are eroded. And that is what we see when, like the Rocky Mountains and others. Now, geological folding does take some time. It doesn't happen overnight. And we do have experimentations and laboratory experimentations showing that rocks can and do fold under the geological pressure. So again, that's not a problem for plate tectonics at all.
Okay, so David, you didn't actually address my question. You just said mountains can be made by uniformitarian process, but you didn't actually address my question, which was how can you get deformed strata by when rocks are the surface temperature of the Earth? Because let me screen share something with you. I want to show you something. So you'll understand that the information, the data that I'm providing isn't coming just from creationists. This is coming from the universities as well, from secular. So if I could screen share something real quick, guys, if you could please screen share something. This is ductile formation. This is from Stress and Strain Rock Deformation, Columbia University. Ductile deformation. Deeper than 10 to 20 kilometers, the enormous lithostatic stress makes it nearly impossible for a rock to produce a fracture. But the high temperature makes rock softer, less brittle, more malleable. Rock undergoes plastic deformation when a differential stress is applied, is stronger than the yield strength, it flows. Now this is the statement you need to listen to. This occurs in the lower continental crust and in the mantle. This is from the secular camp. This is not creationist information. This comes from major universities, and this from Houston, University of Houston, under Chapter 10, Folds, Faults, and Rock Deformation. What determines whether rock bends or breaks? They state, now what they're providing here is what's believed by all these uniformitarianist geologists. This is where they get their information. This isn't just the University of Houston's ideas. This is the curriculum designed by the American Academy of Sciences. Okay, and this is what they state. When an external force is applied to buried rocks under low confining pressure, such as near the surface of the Earth, the rock typically deformed by simple fracturing. Near the surface of the Earth, the rock will fracture. It won't bend. This is known as brittle deformation. Higher confining pressures, a similar directed external force will cause the rock, the deeply buried rock, to actually flow and deform without fracturing. This is known as ductile deformation, and the rock is said to behave plastically. Now here's the kicker statement here. Rocks under low confining pressure near the surface of the Earth therefore generally deform through fracturing and faulting. Rocks deep within the crust under high confining pressure is deformed by folding. So, to get rock to fold, it must be 10 to 20 kilometers inside the Earth where the temperature is high and the pressure is tremendous. But I've shown you photographs of mountains comprised of the surface of the Earth, the first several thousand feet of the surface of the Earth, and they're deformed in the same way going all the way down and folded. Now, what you have to explain as a uniformitarianist is how is it possible for materials at the surface of the continent, on the surface, to deform when uniformitarian geologists themselves state that does not happen. It can't happen because the rock will fracture instead. A mountain forming this way would turn into a pile of gravel. It will not deform with these neat, folded, and bent strata and massive deformations because it's on the surface of the Earth. They state rock must be under high confining pressure, and that happens deep within the crust under high confining pressures. Okay, so your model doesn't work. Mine does. Unless you can contradict the uniformitarian geologists and their curriculum by explaining how rock material on the surface of the continent can deform and fold, There is no explanatory power for uniformitarianism, and then only the Noahic flood can explain it, because the materials had to be soft and moist, filled with water, so they were plastic, not yet concreted into stone yet, you see? That's why they could deform. So can you explain how solid rock will not fracture and turn into a pile of gravel like these scientists would have you believe?
Sure. Allow me to explain from my textbook real quick. I have a geology textbook right in front of me. This is the 12th edition. And here is their explanation of this. Under ductile formation, it's a process in which rock bodies is forced to flow in a state as a solid state, so that it changes shape without fracturing. Ordinary objects that display ductile behavior, including modeling, clay, beeswax, etc. Ductile formation may occur by slippage along planes of weaknesses such as bedding surfaces and formations in rocks. Recall from Chapter 8 that individuals in mineral terrain may also change shapes through the processes of solid-state flow. Let's see here. Since we have been talking about geology for a while,
but David, those statements don't state. They don't state where that material is that allows it to deform. I provided you two secular geology sources from curriculum that state for that to happen, the material has to be deep inside the earth. It won't happen on the surface of the earth. This is the conundrum that uniformitarianists are stuck with. They're teaching kids in school, this happens deep inside the earth, and then when the student asks them, well, why is the surface mountains of the earth, mountains pushed up out of the earth, why are they deformed and have deformed strata and folds in them? The geologist has to just wave their hand and say, well, just trust us, it's the way it happens. It can happen. But you haven't explained how cold, solid rock will bend on the surface of the earth. The uniformitarianist geologists state that has to be down inside the earth, deep, where the pressure is immensely high, because the stuff is covered by 10 to 20 kilometers of overburden. Billions and billions of tons of material have to be on top of it to hold it down there so it can be squeezed horizontally to become deformed. Otherwise, it just goes straight up. It has to be something holding it down. That's 10 to 20 kilometers of the earth on top of it. That's what holds it down there, so it can be deformed, according to uniformitarianism. But the mountains of the earth, many of the mountains of the earth, are formed from the materials that are on the surface of the earth, and proof of this is that you can follow some of the bent strata in these mountains outside the mountain 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 miles away. It's the very same strata that's on the earth in this mountain state of the United States is deformed as the surface of the earth in the Rocky Mountains 1,000 miles away. The same set of strata. Because this material was never deep inside the earth. So explain, I want to know, if you're saying that I'm wrong and the Bible's wrong, you've got to be able to explain how solid rock bends at the surface of the earth. There is no way even the uniformitarian geologists can't explain that. You're not going to.
Okay, so what we'll do, David, if you want to answer that question, we're going to give you uninterrupted time, just so you feel like you're getting enough time to address.
Yeah, give him 2 or 3 minutes, because I was on the mic for about 2 minutes.
And as Neff said, we just want to make sure that you're directly answering Neff's question, just so we can feel that this portion of the discussion would be profitable. So Neff just asked his question pretty distinct and clear. And David, you take as much time as you need to answer it.
All right. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, hear you just fine.
Okay, good. So again, we do see the same exact processes, the same exact features on other planets such as Mars as well. So again, I'm not quite sure how I understand how these are evidence for a global flood. That being said, this is something that I do want to explore, kind of wanted to do a video response to, if you don't mind. I do want to kind of, because we've been talking about geology probably for the past 45 minutes, I do wanted to get into some of the issues with biology and some of the physics stuff as well, if you don't mind.
Okay, we'll talk about something else.
Okay, so
Yeah.
If that's the case, we can end the portion on that specific topic. And if you're happy with that, I guess being like your rebuttal and answer to Neff's question, since Neff did ask a question, why don't we now move to David? You ask a question pertaining to like the flood, Noah's Ark, so therefore something biology related. If it has to do with Noah's Ark species or something, ask your question to Neff, and then we'll give Neff as much time as he needs to answer, and we'll go from there. So go ahead, David, ask your question.
Yeah, definitely. Biology is definitely something that I feel more strongly in suit of. Is more my strong suit than geology. So I definitely want to talk more about the issues of biology. I will definitely be making a video response to some of the issues on geology, if you don't mind. So let's talk about some of the biology issues. First, you said, from what I understand, you said that Noah brought 7 of each kind of animal, correct?
7 of each clean kind, 2 of each unclean, 7 of each clean is what the Bible says.
Sure. So, what exactly is a kind? Can you describe what a kind is?
I would say a kind is a species. You know, the term species was invented by a creationist, right, and usurped by evolutionists. Now it means just whatever they want it to. Evolutionary biologists themselves admit it's difficult, if not impossible, to clearly define what constitutes a species. Right. So the evolutionist has the same problem. When you ask me, what is a kind? All I have to do is say, well, what the heck is a species? Right. You can't tell me any more than I can. All I can tell you is that they seem to be the same type of animal with the same anatomy, and they're able to reproduce. That's all you can do either.
Okay, so I guess would you classify lions, tigers, leopards, and the house cat all in the same kind?
I would say that I personally believe that it's very possible that God created more than one kind of cat. He may not have. It's possible that all the cats of the world are a product of one kind of cat. But I personally am leaning towards believing that all of the small species of cat, like the African wildcat, lynx, bobcat, etc., are one kind, that God made a small kind of cat, and he made a larger cats like tigers, lions, saber-toothed cat, etc., and they all reproduce after their kind. We get big cats. Cats can pretty much be divided into large and small. I mean, there's, you might say, in between, puma, you know, leopard, panther. Those probably were one kind in the beginning, and so there may have been 3, but I think it's likely there were at least 2 original created kinds of cat.
Okay, so that is fair. So would you agree that with how many animals would you say were on the ark? Can you see what I'm going?
I think Answers in Genesis and Creation Ministries International are probably right, between 8,000 to 12,000 animals.
Okay, sure. So 6,000 animals. We're just going to go with 6,000 to 8,000 animals. That is fine to go with. So how exactly did they survive post-flood? What all the predator animals would have wiped out the prey animals within a few days after the flood. Just how could the prey animals have survived?
Well, firstly, you're making assumptions. Firstly, I believe they were hibernating, and that would have put an end to any predation on the ark and conflicts. Secondly, it's entirely possible that that Noah made the cages for these creatures stout enough that none of the animals were able to escape them and go off running around the ark and attack another. I think that's obvious. I mean, why would Noah make skinny little bamboo cages, you know, for a rhinoceros? Of course not. He's going to use massive timbers. The animal cannot get out. But I mean, you may not have needed to if they were all hibernating, you know. And God is capable of manipulating animals. He may have given them a placid state of mind, for all we know.
But I don't think you're understanding the question. I'm talking about after they got off the ark.
Well, after they got off there. Well, I think it's entirely possible, since God intended to for those organisms to reproduce. He could have changed the psychology of those animals so that they weren't attacking each other immediately, and spread out to fill the earth. God can do whatever he chooses to do. He can change hearts and minds. If he can cause the flood, he can change the thinking of an animal. I don't see a problem with that.
Okay, but again, there are obviously animals that are obligate carnivores, such as lions, and such as pretty much all cats are obligate carnivores. They have to eat other animals.
Right.
So again, they would have to go after the other animals immediately after the flood.
What after the other? Eventually, they would have become predatory. Yes, right. But they may not have. They wouldn't have been at the beginning. I don't think when they got off the ark they decided. The baboon got attacked by a tiger immediately. I just don't think so.
This is more ad hoc, but like.
Well, I admit there's a certain ad hoc quality to it, but there's a lot of ad hoc in evolutionism too.
Hold on, Nephilimfree. Just so I can understand your position a bit clearer, is it your position that the predation and carnivorous animals maybe have started after the flood?
No, I believe there was carnivorous activity prior to the flood. In fact, there are fossils of fish swallowing other fish.
Correct.
So, there was absolutely carnivorism in the pre-flood world, no doubt.
Okay. So again, I guess even the bigger question. I know I mentioned it earlier. How did the Nephilim survive the flood?
They didn't survive the flood. They died. Well, wait a minute. Now, in the Nephilim, the offspring of the Nephilim, the only way it's possible is for them to have been recreated again after the flood. The Bible says the sons of God came unto the daughters of men and bare giants. It says there were giants in the earth in those days and after that.
Correct.
That term "and after that" has been studied by Hebraists a lot, and they've scratched their heads. What does that mean? And after what? Why does the Bible say "and after that"? Well, what it means is Bible scholars, the ones who are experts in Hebrew, tend to agree that this is a way of saying there were giants created on the earth before the flood, and there were giants created after the flood. And after that, in the word "that" refers to the flood, the great event. Okay. Of the earth. So it happened again. So angelic beings came to the earth a second time around and did the same thing. The Bible tells us that the first ones that committed this act are now sealed in Tartarus. They're locked up and they can't come out until the end when God will release them. The Bible says nothing, is silent about the angels that came and did it a second time. He doesn't mention what the destiny of them. I can only assume they too have been bound in darkness and chains until the day.
And we know that the Hebrew word Nephilim has been used to describe the Canaanites once the Israelites got there. They were the Bible does use the term.
I just wanted to step in real quick, David. If you wanted to maybe ask another question, more kind of directed and related.
Yeah, the point of the matter is
instead of something theology related, and then we're gonna hand it back to Neff. Neff can ask that question too.
Yeah, actually, you know what? That'll actually be a perfect, if you want to stay in the after show, I think that's a really good topic to explore in the after show.
Okay, so David, if you wanted to ask another flood-related question, or we can hand it to Neff to ask a question. I've got about 10 minutes left on the discussion.
Okay, sure. So I guess let's get to the issue of inbreeding. Where's the bottlenecks? Where's the, they would have, they would have all been inbred like the cheetahs are.
Well, as I pointed out, I don't think genetic diversity is a problem for the creationist count. It seems to be a problem for evolutionists. As I pointed out, I just used one example to demonstrate this. I'll give you two. Firstly, as I pointed out, about a century ago, the bison species almost completely went extinct. There were only a couple of dozen of them left on the earth. Today, there are tens of thousands. Where did all they come from? They all came from, 30 to 50 individuals that existed somewhere between 1900 and 1915. That's where they all come from. There's not a big problem for the bison. They seem to be a healthy animal. So I don't think that's a problem. And also, modern science has discovered that contrary to the evolution theories out of Africa thing, the African tribes, there are numerous tribes of African people, numerous. There's dozens and dozens and dozens, like Native Americans in North America. There's gobs of different tribes of Native Americans. Same true in Africa, dozens upon dozens of different tribes, individual tribes in Africa. They've discovered that the genetic diversity of those those African people and the African continent is greater than the Europeans, the Asians, the Hindu, and other tribes, Slavs, Germanic peoples, of which are allegedly produced by evolution after out of Africa thing. So the highest genetic diversity is in Africa. So we had, so that contradicts the idea because of evolution. See, out of Africa, once man came out of Africa, then his diversity should have increased dramatically, and it would have. But when you compare the genetics of the Slavic peoples to the Germanic peoples to the Polynesians to the Native Americans and Asians and Mid-Eastern peoples, you find there's less difference genetically between them than there is between the various tribes of people in Africa. That's the opposite of what evolution would have us believe.
Can I respond to that? That is completely incorrect. And the reason, you know what?
I can show you a university professor giving a lecture in class.
Nephilimfree, you know what the founder effect is?
I'll just, yeah, I know what you're alluding to, but I just want you to understand. You can watch university professors lecture on this subject and watch them admit on camera that the diversity, genetic diversity of African peoples is greater than the peoples of Europe and Asia.
Correct, and that's because humans originated in Africa. We would expect to find the greatest diversity in Africa because that is where our origin is.
No, that's the opposite of what the theory of evolution posits. The evolution theory posits that diversity increases as population increases and diversifies. You get one, I watched a little snippet of a video that you made where you showed a little snippet from a population. You had little purple dots, a few of them inside a bunch of pink ones. And you showed if we pluck out a little group of pink ones and you got one purple one in there, then he becomes the guy you've just reduced genetic diversity, right? But the problem for that idea is that over time, the purple guy spreads amongst the pink and they get increased genetic diversity. And this would have happened out of Africa. African people allegedly are the closest related, according to evolution theory, Africans are closer related to the hominids that we came from than Caucasian and Slavic and Native American peoples are, and Asians. Genetically, they're closer. That's the opposite of evolution theory. Since the Africans are closer, they should have less genetic diversity. So what we actually find, the data, is the opposite of what the evolution theory would have us believe.
Again, that's entirely incorrect, but that's probably for another debate.
We can debate that another day, yeah.
Yeah, because genetics and biology is what I was more prepared to discuss than geology.
So now let me ask you a question. Science has discovered that that the majority of single nucleotide polymorphs in the human genes that code for proteins, the vast majority of those mutations have arisen in the last 5,000 or to 10,000 years. 5 to 10,000 years. The vast majority of mutations which have modified the genome, the genes that code for proteins in the human genome, the vast majority of those mutations have arisen in the last 5 to 10,000 years. Well, if man has been evolving for tens of thousands of years, that's the opposite of what we should see. Do you see? We should expect instead that this rate of mutation that it should have been going on all along, from when even before humans, the ancestor of humans came into being, and the ancestor of chimpanzees, even before that animal existed. This process had to have been ongoing constantly for all species, which is why the protein codes in this creature are different from that one and that one and that one. They all have unique sets of proteins, right? So if evolution were true, we should see that the protein codes are being mutated continuously throughout the vast ages of evolutionary time. But what we find is data that shows supports young Earth creationism, that man has only been around a few thousand years, because they state the vast majority of mutations to protein codes in man's genome have arisen in the last 5 to 10,000 years. Maybe you could explain to us, here's my question. Can you explain to us why it's logical to believe that man has been on this earth as Homo sapiens for 250,000 to 2 million years, and experienced a ridiculously slow, if non-existent, mutation rate to his protein codes, and then for some reason, unbeknownst to anybody, the protein codes began to experience an outrageously vaster rate of mutations that would change them by a single nucleotide at a time. That rate, why would it begin only 5 to 10,000 years ago, the vast majority of them? What explains the idea that man has been around 250,000 years and have virtually no mutations to his protein codes in all that time? Can you explain that conundrum? How's that possible?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
So I'm thinking, from what I understand, that is from the paper in Nature, correct?
There are a number of papers today. Their Nature has published one like that, yes?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So mostly due to a significant bottleneck, the researchers found that the European Americans had a larger proportion of potentially harmful variations that artifacts explained.
The papers don't relate to just Native Americans. They're talking about mankind, the
Right.
various tribes. They've, sampled DNA from various tribes of man.
Can you cite me the exact paper that you were talking about, so I can know, just so I know exactly the paper?
Cite the paper? Sure. I'll actually give you a screenshot of it if you give me a minute to find it. Sure. It shouldn't take me but a moment. Let me see here. I can pull it up probably pretty fast. Let me see here, because I'm going to show this to you. This is really important. Let's see here. We go. Genetics, mutation. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So let me now screen share. I've got that on my screen. Let me see here. Let me see if I can screen share that. There we go. Pick it. There it is. Nope, that's the wrong one. Hold on. SNVs. Let me pull it up. Okay. Now I'll try to screen share that. Hold on a second. Okay. All right, let me start again to screen share. Here we go. Let me find that. Maybe this is it. Yeah, this is it. Okay. Okay, so give it just a few seconds and it'll come on screen. There's a lag delay between the time you start the screen share and when it actually shows up. I want to make sure the audience can see it. Shouldn't take but a few seconds. Okay, you and I can see it. I think the audience will see it in just a moment. Is it being screen shared? Yeah, here it comes. Okay, so this is an explanation of single nucleotide variants, changing a single nucleotide, therefore changing a triplet codon. I'm going to bypass that. Here we go. So this is from university paper, single nucleotide polymorphs. Let's see. Here we go. Analysis of the paper's title is Analysis of 6,515 Exomes Reveals a Recent Origin for Most Human Protein Coding Variants. They state, we estimate that approximately 73% of all protein coding SNVs, that's single nucleotide variants, and approximately 86% of single nucleotide variants predicted to be deleterious arose in the past 5 to 10,000 years. 5 to 10,000 years, the vast majority of single nucleotide mutations to the protein codes in man's genome have arisen in just the last 5 to 10,000 years. Now, here's another paper. Discover magazine states most mutations in the human genome are recent and probably harmful. They state the same occurred within the past 5,000 years. Surprising, considering that our species may be 200,000 years old. See, this is a conundrum. Evolution can't explain that. You have to be able to explain why man's genome, if man's been around for 250,000 years or more as Homo sapiens, why has his genome experienced this ridiculously slow mutation rate, and then suddenly, boom, the rate goes through the roof? So that the vast majority of mutations to our proteins only occurred in the last 5 to 10,000 years. That doesn't fit uniformitarianism, which would have us believe that the rate should have been relatively steady all the way through the entire history of evolution on the planet for all species. So this contradicts the uniformitarianist evolutionist explanation and is powerful evidence that man has only been around for a few thousand years, and that's why the vast majority. See, if Noah got off the ark 4,500 years ago, that would explain exactly why the vast majority of mutations to our genome protein codes have arisen in 5 to 10, allegedly 10,000 years. But this cannot be explained by the evolutionist.
Okay, so why don't we do this then? David, if you would like a quick response to all those points that Neff brought up, we can either end it with a couple concluding statements if you'd like to, or if you're confident with how the discussion went, we can just go right into the Q&A. So it's up to you guys.
I'm fine doing it either way. Let David have a say about something. If he wants to respond to that, then we can go to Q&A if he wants to, or go right away.
David, are you there? David, please don't tell me you're accidentally on mute again.
Oh God, I am the king of going on mute. I do apologize. I think this has been almost an hour and 40 minutes, so let's just go into Q&A, and then we can...
Well, would you like to address what Neff brought up there at the end, David?
Sure. So I'm just kind of glancing at the paper real quick that he's cited. Establishing the age of each mutation segregated in contemporary human population is important to fully understand our evolutionary history, and will help to facilitate the development of new approaches for disease gene discovery. Large-scale surveys of human genetic variations have reported signatures of recent explosive population growth notable for an excess of rare gene variants, suggesting that many mutations arose recently. To more quantitatively assess the distributive of mutation ages, we sequenced 15,336 genes in 6,515 individuals of European Americans and African American ancestors, and inferred the ages of 1 million to 1.1 million autosomal things. So again, we estimate that the approximately 73% of all protein coding SNV and approximately 86% of SNV predicted to be deleterious arose in the past 5 to 10,000 years. The average age of deleterious SNV varies significantly across molecular pathways, and disease genes contain a significantly higher proportion of recently arisen deleterious SNVs than other genes. Furthermore, European Americans had an excess of deleterious variations, and essential and Mendelian gene disease genetics are results that are limits.
David, sorry, are you just going to read the whole?
I was just kind of reading the abstract just to get a better understanding of the paper.
If you wanted to just study it more, or if you just wanted to actually just give a direct rebuttal, that's fine. But yeah, we don't want to just sit here and listen to.
Yeah, that'll probably be the best idea. Just do a video response to this.
Yeah, I don't think a debate is the time to read a whole paper. So if because I just want to make sure that you feel like you got equal time to address Neff's points. It's my goal to keep a debate as fair as possible. But if you feel like it's just something you want to look more into, we can jump right into the Q&A.
Yeah, let's do Q&A, and then go into the open chat.
Okay, let's get right into the Q&A. Thanks so much for a good debate. It looks like there's going to be a couple after shows. What's interesting is we have somebody who in the live chat seems like a nice gentleman, respectful. I believe he's a geochemist. He's interested in the flood. I think he's interested in joining the after show. So if Brother Neff's there, discussion. So I think there's
the original after show. I think I was originally going to host the after show on my channel. So is LPP going to host his show on his channel? Or my
I know LPP is hosting an after show. Therefore, if you want, David, you can just join that one, and we can all merge the after show into one. But it's up to you.
Yeah, I can probably just do that. It'll probably be easiest just merging my after show into his after show.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the debaters, anyways, before we get into the Q&A, for giving us their time. You guys have been very generous, and also to the audience. We've managed over 40 pretty much the whole time. It's been a really good debate. Definitely one to remember. It's a very interesting topic. So let's see here. Doki Doki Bible Club definitely won the debate with all the super stickers. So there's about 6 up here. Can't even keep up with them. So Doki Doki, congratulations. And thanks so much for those super stickers. Why don't we get right into, we'll start with the super chats here. Okay, so first super chat for $4.99 from DS5252. Thank you so much. More of a statement, but you both can comment. So the way I run the Q&As, I like to be as fair as possible. Whoever the question is for gets the first word, and then the other debater can respond, but we will always give the last word to whoever got the question. So let's see here. We've got, the statement is giant clams and whale fossils have been found on Mount Everest. I guess that's kind of a statement towards you then, David. So if you want, you can have the first word there.
Who, me?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, this is good evidence for the uniformitarian, the way that the mountains build up in the road. It's obvious that the top of Mount Everest, so it's obviously at sea level or under the underwater one day, way back millions of years ago, and so it is definitely evidence that the climatic change on the top of Mount Everest is much different than it was back then. So yeah, I think the fossils got punched up with the mountains. And the reason why we find a lot of clams in the closed position or whatever, I think is also can easily be explained. As they die, if a clam is buried under mud or under sediment, it prevents the mouth from opening up. And so that explains why they are in the closed position. And it would, and hard-shelled animals, such as trilobites and clams, are very easy to fossilize. So that's why we find so many of them.
Go ahead, Brother Neff, if you'd like to respond.
Okay. Well, you could only have a fossil record, as it's called, if there was a Noahic flood. Organisms have to be buried rapidly to become fossil. The Earth's oceans do not possess the mineral content necessary to make fossils. So uniformitarianism tells us the oceans have always been very similar to what they are today. Then there would be no fossil record because it takes high mineral content in the sediments to create a fossil, and you can't have that in uniformitarianism. Uniformitarianism has no potential to explain the existence of a fossil record.
And David, if you'd like the last word on that one.
Yeah, sure. So definitely, and the fossil record is absolutely. I probably should do this as a separate topic. Absolutely, in my opinion, actually refutes the idea of a global flood. We see fossil footprints just a few days ago on Mount Everest. In the Grand Canyon, and we also see 27 fossil forests fossilized on the in Yellowstone Specimen Ridge.
Okay, so we got a question for David from George Bond. Thank you, as usual, George. Question is, if the Earth is eroding at 6 centimeters per 1,000 years, which results in complete erosion of continents, then why do we still find fossils? Go ahead.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Sorry.
Did you want to respond, Neff?
I'm sorry, say again?
So George Bond says, if the Earth is eroding at 6 centimeters per 1,000 years,
yeah,
which results in complete erosion of continents, then why do we still find fossils?
Well, I mean, at the rate of erosion that we see on the continents today, there wouldn't even be continents in 20 million years. So 280 billion tons of materials from the continents erode into the oceans every year. Going backward in time, about the time that the continents would have been gone, in the time between the imagined evolution of birds, as they used to tell it, 40 million years ago to today, no continents in that amount of time. Now, so evolution can't possibly be true. It's just not possible.
Okay, well, thank you, Neff, for that. So let's see. Next question here is from Shadow Dancer. Thank you so much for your question. If the river in the Grand Canyon did erode it, how come round eroded rocks are only at the bottom of the Grand Canyon? Go ahead, David.
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'll read it word for word. So if the river in the Grand Canyon did erode it, how come round eroded rockers, I'm guessing she means rocks, are only at the bottom of the Grand Canyon?
Again, I really don't understand that question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Neff, did you want to comment on
Well,
it?
yeah, the question is a good one. The edges of the rocks throughout the geologic, the column and the walls of the Grand Canyon are edgy everywhere. They're sharp and angular, and from the bottom to the top. And that kind of, if the water had eroded, that's an excellent question. If water slowly over millions of years eroded the canyon down, then it should have rounded all that material. It should be smooth. But it's not. It's all very edgy, which can only be explained if the canyon was formed rapidly and has experienced a brief period of time of erosion that's taken place since then, since the material's concreted and fractured and into little bits and left edgy edges. Slow millions of years of erosion by themselves, without the water of the river, would have rounded that canyon down. It would be a dip in the earth, a dip. It wouldn't even be a canyon there.
And did you have something to say, David?
No, I don't have anything to say.
Okay. Let me see here. Next question. One Punch Man coming at you, David. So, question is, hey, David, how would you explain the Ashley phosphate beds of South Carolina, where the bones of dinosaurs and humans are found in the same layer with many ancient and modern animals? Go ahead.
Can you repeat the formation?
Yes, the Ashley phosphate beds.
David, do you know what the Ashley phosphate beds are?
I do not actually know what they are.
Yeah, I was afraid David
I'm going to have to research that. I am going to paleontology of Ashley phosphate beds of Charlestown, South Carolina.
Yeah, I don't think he can respond to something he's not familiar with.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
And David, there's nothing wrong with that. I guess out of fairness for the debaters, did you want to say anything to it, Neff, or go to the next one?
It's just a jumbled mass of bones. It is explained by massive sheets of water tumbling animals over each other, head and tail, during the Noahic flood, which broke them into pieces, ripped animals apart. You have tree stumps and tree limbs passing through the bodies of giraffes and apes and everything, and just ripping animals to pieces, and then they rot and fall apart, and that's why you have the Ashley phosphate beds.
Okay, well, thank you. So next question from George Bond. Question is for David. Why do you deny secular erosion rates that shows the Earth's landscape would be eroded to sea level within 11 to 12 million years, even with uplift? It doesn't help, he says. Go ahead, David.
I'm going to need to see a citation for that claim. Can you repeat the question again? Now you're on mute, Standing.
Did you have a response there, Neff?
I think David wanted to respond. He didn't hear the question right.
Oh,
David,
you said. Oh, David, I thought you said
you didn't quite get the question. Do you need to be asked again?
Can you do me a favor? Can you actually write the question? Can you copy and paste the questions into the private chat? That way I can list it on myself.
Sure. Okay. So why do you deny secular erosion rate that shows the Earth's landscape would be eroded to sea level within 11 to 12 million years. Even with uplift, it doesn't help. I put it to the private chat, David, if you'd like to look at it.
Yeah, I will have to give a response to that later.
Okay, and Neff, of course, if you'd like to respond, go ahead, brother.
Well, yeah, secular geologists, one of the things some of them do is measure the rate of the erosion of the coasts and the continental material into the oceans. You want to know how fast stuff's being eroded away. And the numbers they get, they fly in the face of uniformitarianism, and they don't know what to do with these numbers. They have to believe that crazy things are happening on the earth right now, even though uniformitarianism is true. They really can't explain it, and they don't really talk about it with the public. They kind of they like to talk about it amongst themselves a little, but they don't really talk about it publicly, and they're not going to discuss it in a classroom extensively because they can't explain it before students who are asking how's that possible in evolution true at the same time.
Okay, and then actually, you know what? That looks like it concludes the questions. We do have, like I said, there's somebody in the chat who I believe is a geochemist who's willing to debate at some point, Neff. So that might be a good debate for us to set up.
Yeah, I'll be happy to debate the flood, but I'm not going to debate geochemistry because I'm not a chemist.
Right, yeah, no, it would be the flood. It would
if you want to debate the flood in general, I'll be happy to do that. But debating chemistry is outside my field of expertise. I'm not a chemist. I couldn't begin to debate chemistry, but I'm sure there are creationist scientists who would be able to take that challenge. I'm not up to it because I don't know chemistry well enough.
Yeah, we would definitely make it flood, and he said
that would be too narrow a subject matter anyway, I think.
Yeah.
By the way, real quick, I just got a question that I want to respond to. David just put in the chat, why do evolutionists always ignore the second law of thermodynamics within millions of years of time frame? And the answer to that question is we don't. The Earth is an open system, not a closed system. It's the same reason that we can, I think, clean a messy room or anything else. The Earth is an open system, not a closed system.
Okay, did you have a response at all, Matt?
Erosion, disorder, entropy.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the question had to do with the second law of thermodynamics.
Yeah, well, entropy occurs all over the Earth. Claiming the Earth is a closed system, or an open system, rather. It's not going to, it doesn't, either way, it doesn't help because entropy is occurring all over the Earth constantly. And that entropy flies in the face of the uniformitarianist explanation for the formation of the solar system. The laws of nature do. The conservation of angular momentum is a major problem for the nebular hypothesis.
Okay, so let's, looks like, another super sticker came in. And I see Neff, you did a super sticker as well. So it looks like the war is on, Doki Doki versus Neff on super stickers.
Oh, I beat him. I had one that was only $1.19.
With all these super stickers, yeah, I was saying I'll be able to retire soon, Doki Doki. I'll do this full time. I'll make sure we have a debate every single night. So yeah, that
Doki's bank is going to be freaking out. They're going to be asking, "What the heck is this guy doing? $1.50 over and over again? Is this guy on drugs?"
Yeah, he's going to be getting a phone call from his bank. What are these super stickers?
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks to the audience. We've still got 45. It's been a good audience today. A lot of people seem to have enjoyed this one. It's a great topic. Thanks to the debaters. Thanks for all the super chats, super stickers, and great questions. We've got an after show on John Maddox's channel. Those are usually one to remember. So go check it out. John will have the link for you, and we'll have some fun. Let's allow the debaters to just give some final words, how they thought it went, if they want to plug in their channels, whatever they want to do. We'll start with you, David. Go ahead.
Well, once again, thank you, Standing for Truth, for hosting this. I'm looking forward to our next debates. Nephilimfree, once again, I really want to thank you for debating me, being generous to chat with me. I will have some more talks that I will present in the after show. So I will make my way over to LPP's channel and get started.
Okay, David, I appreciate that. I enjoyed debating with you, and I hope to crack your nut open a little bit and make you think about things that you haven't really considered. And that's my hope, that you'll give more thought to some of the things that creationists have to say. And I enjoyed this debate. Thank you for debating with me.
All right. Hopefully I wasn't too bad this debate.
It was a good debate. Definitely one to remember before we call it quits. We got 50 in the chat. Make sure you hit that like button, like and subscribe. We've got another debate tomorrow, as you can see down in the bottom. 8:30 p.m. Be here. We got Dr. Garrett taking on Bill Morgan. So that's definitely going to be a good one. So anyways, Standing for Truth is out. God